I've got live on Facebook.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody is well. Today we have a few slides to share with you. Max is going to be going through today the 5 top tips to buying the best investment property. As you know, Max knows lots and lots of information and how she can help you in finding the right properties for your portfolio. So I'm just going to get the slides ready and then hand you over to Maxine. One moment.
Thank you, Laura. Well, I know last week I actually said, look, what we'll do, we'll go and have a look at what's actually going on, just seeing if I can pinch out to a larger view. I can't, going to have to focus on that. So we were looking at what's going on in the market. Let's talk about that. And then I remembered and realised that I've been talking over the last couple of weeks to a number of new landlords and landlords that we have that we're working with who are looking to extend their portfolio. So I thought, well, what happens is we have a chat, we find out what sort of budget you're looking for, we look at what the areas you're looking for, what's important to you, and then I say to you, can you send me the ones that you want to look at? And you've been going off and putting together lists. And I realise how difficult those lists are. So Cliff, hats off to you. Thank you very much for not sending me the 83 that you initially found. But then I realised that you give me those lists and I'm sort of marking as sort of like end of term reports sometimes. And so I thought it might be an idea to give you an idea of the 5 things that I'm actually looking for when I'm looking at an investment property for you. So I'm going to look at it in specific areas as we did last time. So for today, I've got P28, 29 together, P27 and CB23. So I think you'd be interested to see the difference in those properties. The figures that I'm going to be using are coming from a variety of areas. We've got national statistics, we've got On the Market, Rightmove, Zoopla, we've got Land Registry, and historically we've actually used those figures to gauge how well we do as a business. Why? Because we want to make sure we're doing the right thing for you. It's all very well us living in our little bubble, winning lots of awards, which we do, great. But if we're not getting the right rents, if we're not hitting the right mark, we're not actually working for you. So as I say, historically, these figures have been used to check how we're doing against the outside world. And I've talked about the top tips for investment, but there's going to be some figures here that if your property is coming up for remarketing, you can actually see what you're actually going to be getting, what we're gauging our remarketing figures on. So let us get started and let's look at the first area.
Just before we move on to that slide, just to remind everyone, if you do have any questions, please just pop them in the comments below. I can see them live, so if you do put a comment there, I'm happy to ask Max at the end, and hopefully we'll be able to help. That slide, just to remind everyone, if you do have any questions, please just pop them in the comments.
And I've got feedback from the other side, so I'm going to stop that. Excellent technology. Yeah. Hi, Cliff. How you doing? So let's start off by actually looking at PE 28 and 29. Now, I appreciate this isn't the absolute area. It really is a case. 28 is a very odd U-shape area. So it's just I look at an overall area. I call it a bit my blob graph because this gives me an idea of what is actually going on in the area. The dark blue areas are household developments. And then you've got the pink, which is the commercial developments. Both are really interesting and sort of things that you actually need to know. So, for example, we're looking at 87 dwellings coming on in Godmanchester, 340 dwellings coming on in Salttree. Interesting, 5,000 units coming on in Aucklandbury, which it's great. You've got an office and a distribution centre on the new junction 10 of the A14. So that tells me we're actually looking at a good and vibrant area, and that is good for rental. And sometimes people say, oh, wait a minute, what do I do? Do I buy a new build? Do I buy an older property? What's the best thing to do? It's going to come down to you and budget, to be perfectly honest. With a newer build, you will definitely get more rental than you would of the similar sort of property as an older. However, we've seen in Godmanchester, nothing was affected on the Crow Hill estate with all the Roman Way developments, with all the Yes developments and the developments of the golf course in St Ives, saw absolutely no change. It's just a new market. So if we could just move on to the next one. And my first top tip, because as Laura said, I'm going to show you my 5 top tips on this, is know the area and the rental market, or talk to someone who does. So what do I know up here? I know that we've got a low crime rate. Great. I know that we've got some good state schools, and I know where those schools are. So we could look at, if you're looking at family properties, we look around the areas there. I know we've got a variety of employers, which is actually also a very good thing, because when Thomas Cook went under, that really caused a little ripple up in Peterborough. So I know we've got a good spread. I also know we've got 472 restaurants in that area, only 14 of which you could get poisoned at. They've got poor hygiene. So we know that sort of detail. But the thing is, we also know the history of the area. So if you were talking to the man down the pub about this area here, he's going to be saying, man down the pub, and particularly if he's been in rental for a long time, you need to get a big place and you'll rent it out with the base. 20 years ago, that was absolutely correct. And if that person hasn't updated what's going on in the rental market now, they will be steering you in the wrong direction. Because 7 years ago, obviously, Auchenbury was closed by that time, but Molesworth started to slow down on the number of houses they used in the outside market. They were moving more of the US personnel into Lakenheath. So we saw I suppose in some respects, just that market shrink quite a bit. So really the first top tip is to know the area and the rental market that you're actually looking at. And I'll talk about the rental market in a little bit more detail. I'll pick it up with something else. So the first thing we can look at is advertised versus sales. So these figures coming from a couple of areas. In Mauve, we're getting them from On the Market, Rightmove, Zoopla. They are the advertised prices. In green, you've got the sold prices, which are actually coming from, not surprisingly, Land Registry. Now, there's obviously a little bit of a time lag here, so you're not looking at exactly comparison day-to-day figures. However, it's giving me an idea of what is going on in the market. So I look at this and I say immediately, right, oh, 1 bed. So that 1 bed, I'm most probably going to be paying more for that 1 bed than the asking price. Now have a look at the 3 beds. You're looking at 3% less than the asking price. Overall, from that graph, I can say you're looking at around about 9.4% less than the asking price. There are deals to be made. And now let's actually have a look at sales activity. So, you know, I don't get involved in selling properties, so I have no right to comment on what is going on in the sales market. All I can do is look at graphs like this. I'll take a little bit of issue with this because although it's saying it's a buyer's market, you've got something called COVID and an international pandemic going on. So obviously everything did slow down. Now, what we hear from estate agents is it's really busy out there and people are doing deals. And we are seeing some deals being done. There's no doubt about it. I'm not sure it's as bad as this graph would say, purely because my understanding is deals are being done, but it's the conveyancing, it's everything else that is actually holding stuff up. So what I'm going to hang my hat on is the fact that I can get a deal. I know because it's actual factual that I can get less for the property than it's basically being advertised. So that's where I would hang my hat rather than look at the sales activity. So on to top tip number 2. The estate agent works for the vendor. Now, I've put there The Art of War, and I'm doubtless not going to pronounce it correctly, by Sun Tzu. And he was, I'm going to say 13th century, no, a lot earlier than that, but wrote 13 chapters on the art of war, on meditation, on how to gauge things, on basically how to, if you are interested actually in psychology, in the way to negotiate things, in mediation, this is a great book to read. And one of the things that I suppose picked out of this is one of his comments is, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. What the hell am I going on about? The estate agent is not the enemy in any way, shape or form. However, they could stop you from getting the best deal that you want. So you need to understand that they are not working on your behalf. You need to understand that you've seen the property most probably with somebody. So you've got a bit of a relationship there. Then you're going to have someone negotiating with the vendor. You need to get near to the vendor as possible. Reason being, you need to understand their motivation. They need to understand your motivation. Most probably you can get to a better deal. And I'm not talking about finding out how you can screw the vendor into the ground. I'm saying that you can get more to the win-win, but very much be aware that sometimes you've got to take that negotiation into your own hands. So let's have a look next at property yields. So rental yields then, and I've put this as the starting point in this area. What we're looking at is factual information based on the sales price of a property in that area. So we can see a 2-bed is basically renting out at £765 a month, sorry, and you've got sort of difference between a 4.8, 4.7. So a 2 and a 3-bed, there's not a huge difference with regard to yield, but obviously there is a difference with regard to price. So again, it comes down to your budget. Now, this is actually the first area that we start looking to find out whether we're hitting the market correctly where it comes to rental figures. If you look at Rightmove, they'll say in East Anglia, it's rather big. In East Anglia at the moment, they're saying that the average rental is £828. Well, we know that East Anglia will include some of the coastal sides. They will bring the rental down. But we look at this, and I know we would take an average of an average, but if we actually look at this, we're looking at an average of 888. In P28-29, we achieve an average of 875. So I know we're there or thereabouts. But yields are very subjective. I will never know what your cost of your mortgage is, what the other costs you've got in mind. I will never know that. So I can only give you I'll tell you it's the fag packet side of things. But as long as you're aiming actually at that 4 to 5%, then you're in the right zone for the area. Now, the next thing is rental activity. Very much similar to I suppose in some respects, the sales activity. And I am in the rental market. I would agree very much this is a landlord's market. However, I would take huge issue with the figure that they're promoting to say the number of days for renting a property as 53.55. No way. Seems they're getting this from Rightmove and Zoopla. And since we're part of that, it's obviously taking our figures. But what are we looking at here? We look at 2 measurements. We look at the void. So your tenant leaves on one day and you get the next tenant moving in. So our void period for September was 18 days. And you might think, well, that's rather high. Why it doesn't take that long? Because that's taking into account where you as landlords, you want to repaint a place, you want to put new carpets in, One landlord wanted to do a new kitchen and a bathroom in between that time. So that would affect that figure. So as long as we understand, and we've actually reduced that figure by 4 days, which I was really, really pleased with. The other figure we actually look at is remarketing, how long it takes to market a property. And that's from the moment it goes online to the moment that the tenant says, yes, they would like to take the property. Now that it includes is 28 days for September. And like the void, it does include weekends. Why is it so high? Basically because of the situation. In most cases at the moment, we can't get into the property because the tenant doesn't want us in because of COVID. So we have to do live viewings, we have to do virtual viewings, anything to help you move it forward. But we can't actually get the deal until such time the tenant's moved out. We can get the person who's taken it as an agreement in principle, make sure they're happy moving in, and then take it from there. So it's definitely not 53 days. It's certainly 28 days is a long time, because really, like this time last year, we were most probably looking at 14 days, but at least we know the reason why. So let's move on to our next area, P27. So we're looking at the same blobby graph, as I say. So we can see we've got development going on, and we've got a little bit of commercial development going on at Compass Point. One thing that I will be so surprised at is if you look down at the bottom left-hand side, that is the old Vindis garage, and there are planned 105 dwellings to go on there. I do not know how they're going to fit 105 dwellings on, so that'll be interesting to see. But again, what have we got in this area? Low crime, good schools. We've got 120 houses coming up in Bluntisham, which they've approved. So things are moving forward. We've got employment in the area, we've got moving in the area, passes rental criteria. Again, let's look at advertising versus sold for P27. Now here, I look at this graph and I go, ooh, there are definite deals to be had. A 4-bed showing a reduction of 16%. Overall, we've got a reduction of 12%. So again, where the same figures are coming from the same place. So these are factual, although a little bit delayed on the actual sales price. Now let's have a look at these rental yields. So here we've got a 1-bed at 5%, earning 669. A little bit of a health warning there, that could be an apartment. And with apartments, and this is why I say yields are quite subjective, because if you've got an apartment, you're going to have a service charge. You're most probably going to have a management company asking you to pay something to them every time you do a tenant, and that may suit you. Do a tenant, put a tenant in, that may suit you. But it really is a case that don't think that, right, rushing out and getting a 1-bed in P27 and I'm going to earn a 5% return. It really depends on the property. And again, how do we measure it? So the average rental here in P27, 913. So we're achieving actually 897. So we're there on the mark. But let's look at some more details of what we can look at, what we can see. These are details of the profile of the actual area, P27, that area that I was looking at the map. And what we can see, there are more 3-beds. Nothing to do with just rental. This is what is in the area. So there's more 3-beds than anything else. Yeah, I would agree with that. The average size, you're looking at most probably about 780 square foot. Yeah, have that. Got a bit of an issue with mainly detached. I don't really see that, but then again, I'm on the rental side, so maybe that is my reality. But again, what I would agree with is most have a higher, an EPC of D, so that's the average there. But so people say to me, what shall I buy? Shall I buy a 2 or a 3-bed? Well, I think as I've shown you in both areas, the yield is not that much different. So it really comes down to what budget you're actually looking for and what you want to make up, how you make up your portfolio. They're the most important things. It really is a case of, so you could say, well, what are people asking for? And I've thought about this over the years because, to be perfectly honest, people will ask realistically for what we advertise. It's very rare that we get people come in and go, right, I definitely want a 3-bed in St Ives, could you help me? They will usually come in and say, that 3-bed in St Ives that you've got on, I am really interested in. So I thought it might be an idea to just overlay the number of bedrooms with what we have as stock on the rental side, and just let you see the difference. So immediately you can see the stock, and this is this is out of our 850 properties that we manage. So we've got far more. We've got 39% of the properties in P27 are 2-bed, 28% are 3-bed, only 7% are 1-bed. Now, I think the next slide may explain that a little bit more. So not only can we look at the split of properties, we can also look at the profile of people in P27. And the first thing I'll take you to is the age. You can see that there's a real spread there. You've got young couples, you've got young families, you've got older families, you've got people getting divorced, but it's a real age spread. There's no one particular area you would go to. So in that case, is there a huge demand for 1-bed properties for up-and-coming professionals? Maybe it's not the area. We also look at the, the National Readership Score, the NSR score, and we're lower middle class in P27, just so you know. So mainly the employment is clerical, administrative, junior management, and the average household income we know is just over 50 grand. So understanding the profile of the people, there's 2 areas there. One, if someone comes to me and says, oh, I want to get a retirement home because if I buy it now, I can use it for myself in the future. If you want to use it yourself in the future, brilliant. Don't work it on being a fantastic rental in the meantime. You can see there isn't a particular market there. And really the same thing with 1-beds. And that may explain why, well, I suppose if I've had anything to do with it, I don't really advise anyone to take a 1-bed property. So let's go on to the next tip. Know who you are buying for. Who are your customers? Understand that general demographic. Understand that you've got a mixture, you've got families, so you're not really looking at 1-bed apartments. Understand that, and then that makes the fact that you're going for your yield much better. You want to understand where they'll be working. You want to understand what they actually want. Thing is, we know what they don't want. They don't want nice kitchen with chicken tiles. They don't want bathrooms with floral tiles. It's sort of showing them to be a bit dated. So really what they're actually looking for now, and I suppose really since March, to be perfectly honest, you're looking for a home office, good broadband and a garden. So they're the things realistically we would be looking at to sort of guide, has that got what you need to make sure. But really tip 3 is who are you buying for? And we've got another tip coming up immediately, tip 4. And I think you'll have to press a button there, Laura. Negotiate like your life depended on it. I don't read a lot of self-help books, please don't get me wrong, but there are things that certainly during the morning walk with the dogs, I love doing an audio book. And I started off with TED Talks and came across this Chris Voss. If you ever do Chris Voss TED Talks, he's a Brooklyn guy, super confident, head of the FBI negotiators for hostages, knows his stuff. He's written a book, Never Split the Difference. What does he mean? Actually, this book is all about negotiation. What he's saying is that, I suppose simply, usually, let's say property's 150, so you might think, oh, all right, I'll go in at 140, and you might end up at 145. And sort of like everyone's happy, you know, sort of like it's worked out. Make the offer in odd numbers. Now, what do I mean? I've actually done this and it actually worked. I didn't believe it. So we said, all right, start off at 140. So the idea is, the logic is, so let's say you start at 137, 258 and 26p. That's stupid, isn't it? Well, actually, what it's showing is that you've really worked out the figure that you can afford. And within that, you've got to say, look, really appreciate and respect that you want the 150. And you've got to make sure they understand that you really want that house. It's no good going, oh, well, I'll take it or leave it. You take it or leave it. You've got to make them feel warm and fuzzy that you really do want that house. And the fact is, you're coming in this really odd figure. It's like, blimey, you've really worked this out. If that's not accepted, the idea is, okay, you increase it by a certain percentage. Don't do 10%, do 17%. Again, it gives you this really odd figure. The psychology of it works, but you've got to try it to see. But it really is negotiate life. Your life depended on it. If you do I suppose in some respects, if you overpay for a rental right from the beginning, it's going to take absolutely ages for you to feel, goodbye, that was a fantastic deal. I'm getting a good yield out of it. So that's the top tip there. So let's move on to finally CB23. Now, it isn't totally CB23. Realistically, what I'm looking at is the areas, the villages west of the A14. Yeah, I think so, west of the A14, but just starting to encompass the edge of Cambridge, because that's where we work as well. So again, I'm looking at, well, average planning in this area, although strange, is 476 properties going to be coming up in Camborne. So that's ever growing. More rural, so a wider spread. This side of the A14, remember, you are not directly on the guided bus route. You've got to go over the other side for that, but still actually quite a good area. Let's look at the advertised versus sold. So a 26% reduction on a, I think it was there, a three bed there. No, a 26 on a 2-bed. Amazing. But again, I'm instantly seeing that there are deals to be made in the rental area. Okay, certainly not at the higher end, that CB23, yeah, they're absolutely going, but that really isn't the rental market. Rental market you're looking at is anything from 1 to 4 bedrooms. So deals are made. Look at the yields again. So still on that 4% yield of things, basically still looking at the average revenue, the average rental being in line with what we are looking at. I think a little bit of word of warning here is, once you start getting into the CBs, that 1 or 2 beds could be apartments, and you've got the same thing as I was talking about earlier. You've got service charges, you've got management fees. So to be perfectly honest, that yield might not be there, but we're still in the same zone. It's the 4 to 5%. But the interesting thing is really the next slide. And there it comes. We can now see that the average age is much younger. Obviously, you've got the edge of the university side of things, but this isn't university students because you're looking at 20 and over, and you're gradually decreasing. So here, and I'd be saying to you, if you're looking in that area, yeah, the smaller, swanky apartments, they're most probably absolutely right for the area. You're looking at an average income of 55, and here they're most probably ABs, which is higher management. It's basically the higher end professionals. So there's deals to be done, but make sure you understand the profile of people. Have a look. Let's see what we've got. So going back to this, what sort of market is there? It's still a landlord's market because of the amount of properties that are turning over. But as said, I've got a serious problem with the 63 days or 64 days it's taking to rent a property. We are just not finding that ourselves. So up with the final tip. We have got there. We have looked at 5. Ooh, could we go back one slide? And lovely. So plan your strategy.
I promise I didn't there. We've got a slight faulty slide. I'm very, very sorry, people. If you just bear with me 1 second, I'm just going to load that up.
I shall talk about it. So plan your strategy. Now, you've got a budget. You've decided the rental yield that you're actually looking at. When you go and look at properties, have a checklist. You might be seeing properties over a period of time. You may be seeing a whole lot in one day. But if you're seeing them over a period of time, you've got to remember what the points were. Have your sheet and mark it out of 10. What sort of things are you looking at? What does the outside look like? What's the pavement appeal? What is a case of what does next door look like? Have they got grotty navy curtains with holes in? Is the garden rather unkempt? Oh, there was a bin on the floor. That's going to cause you a problem, because if you can't, if you're taking someone along to see a property, then realistically, they need to make sure that they are looking at a fabulous area. So if you've got those things, be careful. We've talked about apartments, and one thing with an apartment you really got to make sure of is what the entrance is like. As people walk in to go to those apartments, what is it like? More deals are lost walking into smelly entrances with piles of paper than anything else. You could have an absolute palace once they get past that, but we've got to get them past it. That really is the main thing. The other thing is what's around the corner. I said, oh, I'll come back to legislation. And also something really, I suppose I should have mentioned it, at knowing the rental market. An estate agent is not going to possibly know that by 2025, the government is aiming to get all properties up to a C on an EPC. So that may not need anything there. I mean, obviously all modern properties are, but they are looking at carbon. They want to reduce carbon, and they see carbon as very much a case if we can get it done in houses. There are grants around and things like that. But if you go and buy this pretty picture box cottage, Victorian cottage with a very low E rating now, yes, you can rent it out now, but we don't know what's around the corner. And that's what you've got to be aware of, what's around the corner, and you make your judgment from there. As long as you know the risk, then that's how it runs. So, well, we've lost the last slide. There were 5 tips. And I hope that we've actually given you a little bit of taste of the thought processes that I go to try and help you get the best investment. So if you are looking for more information on a particular area, just get in touch with me. You can get in touch via the Landlord Live group, or you can get in touch by maxine.lester@maxineLester.co.uk. You could either use telephone, which is 01480 494939. We're here to help. We're here to make sure that you do buy the best investment that you possibly can. And I think by just focusing on those 5 tips, that will help you. So thank you so much for your time. I know there were a lot of slides to go through. I really hope they've been useful. Take care until next week. Make sure you wash your hands, and we'll see you next week.
And
Thank you very much. Oh,
yeah, the lovely Cliff has got a little bit from personal experience here in regards to viewings. To close every internal door might be broken from inside the room, and open curtains, blinds, which may hide a broken window. So very, very handy tips there.
absolutely.
When to purchase a rental property. Nice to see a few of you joining us. David, hello Katie as well, and Roz Gibbs has joined us as well. Lovely to, well, not see you, Roz, but you're there in presence. So if anyone after this does have any questions, don't forget this video will now be saved on our landlord group, so if you need to go back and watch it just to take it all in again, you can. It will always be there.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Take care, everyone.